Lately, it seems as though all sorts of premiere anime series include some sort of horror element. There's something special and extra appealing about getting some wicked scares in there. However, a lot of excellent freaky stuff goes under the radar because it's put into a feature film package instead of an episodic series. So today we're going to be counting down the top 5 anime horror movies that deserve your attention. Before we get started though, we've got a message from today's sponsor, Audible. That's right, the premier service for audiobooks and spoken word entertainment. With thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, workouts, and meditations to choose from, there's always something to listen to. Plus, as a member, you get access to titles from Audible's premium selection, meaning that you can stay up to date on all the biggest buzzworthy audiobooks. Comedy, romance, true crime, sci-fi, self-help, and more, all at your fingertips with Audible. Plus, as a new member, you can try it free for 30 days. To get started, visit audible.com/top5 or text top 5 to 500 500. I loved listening to Peter Straub's Ghost Story, a haunting tale of murder and mayhem. So make sure you give Audible a try today. Now, let's get on to our list. Coming in at number 5, Legend of the Overfiend. In the late 80s, a wild feature film shocked the anime-starved Western world. Based on an erotic horror manga series written and illustrated by Toshio Maeda, Urotsuki Doji blew a whole bunch of minds. See, this series had a pretty successful run in Japan, what with the manga, long-running anime saga, and more, but this was way back before Japanese content was widely available in America. So when this hit theaters, it brought people in droves. In fact, it was so influential that many people consider it a classic of the anime horror genre. Hell, just look at some of the comments on our other horror anime movie lists, and you'll find dozens of folks asking us to include it. So yeah, Legend of the Overfiend is a cult classic that should be on any completionist watch list. However, thanks to its age, subject matter, and general production value, one should probably take the recommendation with a grain of salt. This is an intense movie with plenty of over-the-top disturbing imagery. Being an Eroguro production, there is tons of both overtly sexual and gore-filled stuff going on here. We follow a couple of demon-human hybrids on their quest to find the Chojin, a god of demons who's hiding in a human body somewhere. It's said that this demon will bring forth a new era and possibly could save the world. It's totally up to interpretation though. Now, on this journey to find the Chojin, the human demons come across their fair share of folks from both sides of the line, humans and demons. A lot of the time, their interactions result in horrific violence or tentacle-fueled assaults. In fact, Legend of the Overfiend is often credited with popularizing said cephalopodic acts. So if you can handle all that and are familiar with the more adult themes here, this is a historic anime horror movie experience. Number 4, Twilight of the Dark Master. Now take this title seriously because it is dark, and not just in subject matter. Like visually, the movie is super duper dark. A lot of anime movies marketed towards adults back in the day tended towards an atmosphere bereft of light, but geez. Twilight of the Dark Master still manages to be extremely visually impressive, especially for the time, despite this lack of brightness. Another interesting tidbit worth mentioning is that this is one of the first anime written by an American. Really? It was adapted from its original manga by none other than Duane Delamico. Not sure why I said none other than there, because he hasn't been credited with anything since. But what a classic 90s American otaku name, Duane. Plus, this one got released in the West before it was available in Japan. So for an anime movie with a cast and crew that was almost entirely Japanese, save for Duane, it managed to be very distinctly American. Impressive and fascinating. In terms of a story, it's a pretty classic late 80s, early 90s OVA. Plenty of violence and gore and trauma-based sex stuff. We're dropped into a world filled with humans and demons, constantly getting into scraps with one another. However, the demons turn out to be too powerful, so the goddess that rules over all decides to create a new type of being to protect the humans. Classic stuff, really. An ancient fire manipulator shows up and discovers the demonic plot to enslave all of humanity and decides to put a wrench in that. And a woman whose fiance turns out to be a demon is trying to take out her former lover, too. Again, this is a classic example of OVAs in the pre-2000s era, and is a fascinating watch for sure. Just don't go in expecting anything revolutionary and you'll have a good time. Coming in at number 3, The Garden of Sinners. You're in for a real treat with this entry, as The Garden of Sinners isn't just one horror anime movie, it's a whole series. You heard me right, there's something like 8 entries in this paranormal investigation saga. We meet Shinki Ryogi, heiress of the Ryogi clan. Wielding a knife and a deep knowledge of the paranormal, she finds herself involved in all sorts of spooky situations. In each movie, different themes are explored through the use of ghosts and other assorted entities. Most of these themes are quite mature and often disturbing, which adds to the general dark and foreboding vibe of the series. However, there's plenty of friendly banter between the protagonist and her friend-turned-lover, and lots of wicked action too. For a lighter watch than the previous entries that still features a lot of quality horror, check out any of these entries in the series. It doesn't really matter what order you watch them in, as each story kind of exists on its own, but there are a lot of crossovers between them, so be prepared to get a little confused if you decide to randomly select one. Coming in at number 2, The Empire of Corpses. Let's talk about a steampunk detective zombie Frankenstein movie. That's a lot of stuff to pack into one movie, right? Especially a horror anime movie, but honestly, works out pretty well. We meet a young lad named John Watson who has become resolute in researching the phenomenon behind the missing souls of undead humans brought back to life to perform menial labor. He's discovered by the British government, who employ him on a quest to find Victor's notes. You know, Victor Frankenstein? It's amazing what you can do once something's in the public domain, right? So John Watson, his pal Friday, and a bunch of other eccentrics journey throughout a steampunk-inspired world in search of a resurrected corpse that still has a soul. Necromancy, mystery, adventure, and more. Who could say no to a movie like that? And coming in at number 1, we've got Seoul Station. More movies should do this. A fully animated prequel to your massively successful flick. Now that's how you world build without goofing up too hard. Like, you know how in Train to Busan the zombies just kind of show up? Well, if you're wondering how an outbreak like that could possibly begin, Seoul Station provides some additional details, and it does this while also weaving a tragic and compelling story about the folks who dealt with the zombies first. We meet 3 unfortunate characters: a father searching for his long-lost daughter, a daughter who is now a prostitute, and her boyfriend, a desperate guy trying to pimp her out once again. Their paths cross just in time for a chaotic outbreak to burst forth at the bustling Seoul Station. With that, the trio has to do their best to negotiate their complicated relationships while staying alive and fending off the undead. It's tense, action-packed, and well animated. Plus, the story doesn't get lost in the chaos, as tends to be the case with a lot of other anime horror movies. It's a top-notch addition to the Train to Busan universe, and stands on its own 2 feet pretty well, even if you're not familiar with the other entries in the series. This is probably the most accessible pick on today's list, but that doesn't mean it's tame. There's all sorts of radical and out there stuff going on, and it'll grab your attention and hold it to the very end. And there you have it. 5 frightening and fun anime horror movies spanning decades. Old school OVAs and new school adaptations, all right there for your viewing pleasure. So, what'd you think of the list? Do you agree with my picks? What's the best anime horror movie you've ever seen? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more heinous ones from the top 5 angels that are worse than demons. Sai Subtor says it's weird how accurate Bayonetta is at random tidbits, like the witch's use of hair and angelic monstrosities. Right? Sometimes I forget that you're fighting angels in Bayonetta, especially with how grotesque some of them can be. Crystal Sparks said this could be a reason on why some people are scared when dying. You expect to see human-like with wings, you see something with 4 faces and 6 wings. Isn't it supposedly a regular occurrence that angels say, "Be not afraid" when showing up? Maybe it's because they know they're hideous to humans. Lord Null 1 says regarding the seraphim, it should be noted that in biblical texts, feet is occasionally used as a euphemism for privates. Make of that what you will. Not so sure I like what I'm imagining right now. RJ Ehlert says, I appreciate the parallel inspiration H.P. Lovecraft took from Seraphim. A choir of lesser outer gods plays music eternally to keep the greatest old one Azathoth asleep so it doesn't destroy existence upon wakening. Ah, the good old cosmic trumpeteers. I really hope I never have to hear that music. And Jelly Technician says, I feel like God's just gonna reset his PC. See, I'm a big fan of this interpretation of the we're all in a simulation theory. God dreamed up a big-ass gaming computer to run this life sim and gave us all smaller versions of it to do the same. Classic. And that's all the time we have for today. I'm gonna take a nap in a wheat field during harvest season. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.